Well, my name's Don Marshall, and I'm running for the House of Delegates in the 63rd District. My choice of when and where to make this announcement is deliberate. For those of you who don't know, I was a history major, so I like the idea of making my announcement on President's Day when we honor two of our greatest leaders. George Washington was never considered one of the great thinkers of the Revolution. He was no Jefferson or Franklin, but he was an amazing leader of men. He was respected for his honesty, integrity, and his devotion to duty before self. What you may not know is that Washington was very concerned when the two-party system emerged. He was afraid that politicians would become more loyal to their party than to their country. They say he wasn't a great thinker, but he apparently knew something about politics. Abraham Lincoln is the other president we honor today. We know him as a humble man who gave his life for the belief that the unity of our country was more important than the issues that divided us. But did you know that he won the Civil War with a cabinet that was made up of Democrats and Republicans, some of whom had been his rivals in the presidential campaign? His leadership brought out the best in this diverse and often competing team and enabled him to tackle the major challenges of his day. Now, I'm making my announcement at the foot of a bridge that was built almost 200 years ago. It was here when Lincoln was president. But who built the Van Meter Ford Bridge? A Democrat? A Republican? A Whig? The party doesn't matter. What matters is this bridge was built by those who wanted a better future for their county and their community. And they built that better future. Now, I've crossed several bridges in my life. Some of them have been like this bridge. When you start crossing, you don't always know what's on the other side. The journey that brought me to the foot of this bridge began in Morgantown, where the foundations of my life were laid, where I learned the values that helped me to meet life's challenges. One of the most important things I learned there was the value of public service. From my father, who was a professor at WVU and a volunteer EMT. For my mother, who worked as a realtor to put money in my college fund, and then when we cleared the dinner table, she'd sit down and work on a variety of community causes. Like many young West Virginians, I had to leave the state to follow my career, but the state and the lessons I learned here never left me. My life in public service began at the Defense Intelligence Agency, a combat support agency where I worked side by side with our men and women in uniform as an intelligence officer, providing the analysis we needed to attack the heroin threat. As many of you know, September 11, 2001 was a day that changed my family's life forever, when my wife Shelley was killed at her post in the Pentagon. It would have been easy to be consumed by my grief after such a loss, but you wouldn't let me. You stood beside me and taught me something about compassion and the better angels of our nature. In the aftermath of that dark day, I made one of the best decisions of my life, and I moved here, where I found a new home and new friends and a remarkable new bride, my wife Heather. Why am I running for the West Virginia House of Delegates? Because this state gave me my start in life, and this state and this community gave me a second chance at life. I owe the state and you an incredible debt, and being your delegate is one of the ways I can offer something in return. But I'm also running because I know this community and its needs. When I ran for the House in 2010, I knocked on almost 3,000 doors. I stood on the doorsteps of people just like you. I sat at their kitchen tables, and we talked about the issues that mattered. Since moving to the Eastern Panhandle, I've worked with over a dozen charities, from the United Way to the Berkeley Arts Council to the Eastern West Virginia Community Foundation. I've put together learning centers and a daycare where half the children come from families living at or below the poverty level. But it's a daycare that enables their parents to go off to work or to school and to try and break the cycle of poverty. And I've pulled tires and trash and even sofas out of the Opequon here with the Opequon Creek Project team. And it's more fun than it sounds, believe me. I've advocated for the building of libraries in Berkeley County, and I've worked with a community coalition to fight the drug problem that's tearing our families apart. With all these nonprofits, all these causes, I've never once asked the people around the table with me whether they were Republicans or Democrats, because it doesn't matter. I've worked with these groups to identify realistic goals. I've drawn out the strengths of individuals within these groups. And together we've worked hard, side by side, to come up with solutions and to reach our goals. This is the work ethic I'll take with me to Charleston. I'm a Democrat, but this isn't a Democratic work ethic. It's a Berkeley County work ethic. It's an ethic that respects different ideas and points of view, because that's how you develop the strongest answers to the challenges we face. And with your help, those are the challenges I'll take on. I'm not going to Charleston to forward one party's political agenda. I'm going there to forward our agenda, to address our concerns and to work effectively with people on both sides of the aisle to get things done. And here are some of the things we need to do. We need to create jobs, but they need to pay well. Parents shouldn't have to work 2 jobs to raise their family. We can bring these high-paying jobs to Berkeley County by common sense reforms of the tax code and the regulatory framework, by giving local governments the tools they need to attract and keep big businesses and to make life easier for small businesses, and by encouraging our local community colleges, vocational schools, and universities to offer training that we need for 21st century jobs. A key step in creating an educated workforce is to acknowledge the vital role that teachers play in our community, and then pay them accordingly. Adequate pay and benefits will enable us to hire qualified and experienced teachers and keep them on the job long enough to make a difference. But we also need to ensure that our teachers and administrators have the tools they need to create a classroom environment that's safe, focused, and encourages learning. One that puts an emphasis on educating children and giving them the critical thinking skills they're going to need in the 21st century. One that puts the teacher in charge of the class, not the standardized test. We need to provide support to our emergency service personnel. We can never pay these heroes enough for putting their lives on the line for us, but we can do a lot better than we're doing now. We can acknowledge our volunteer firefighters and EMTs by giving them property tax breaks on their vehicles, the vehicles they use to answer our calls for help. We can give our police the tools they need to fight crime. Too often the source of that crime is drugs. I fought in the drug wars for more than a decade, so I have a pretty good idea of the tools that law enforcement needs. But for years now, we've neglected another key tool in the fight on drugs. We need to increase the availability of drug treatment. There are people who want to get off drugs, and they can't because there aren't enough treatment slots. Substance abuse is costing us almost $500 million a year in West Virginia. An investment in treatment will mean savings of millions of dollars very, very quickly. But it will do more than save dollars. It will save lives and it will save families. Ultimately, everything comes back to our families. We need to give parents those good-paying jobs so they have the resources and the time to be parents. We need to give kids safe schools where they can learn the skills they need to thrive. And we need to make sure that college or job training is within reach for young people and that there are good jobs waiting for them when they're ready. Hand in hand with supporting our families is the need to assure that our seniors are treated with dignity and respect by the society that they've built with their own blood, sweat, and tears. When you look at neighboring states, it's clear we can offer our seniors more tax relief. It's also clear that we can do more to control health care costs. No one should have to choose between paying for food or paying for medicine. And to that end, we must defend Medicare and Social Security from plans to privatize them. Medicare works. We don't need to hand it over to insurance companies that tell doctors how to treat patients. Social Security works. We don't need to hand it over to Wall Street. After the last few years, do I need to explain why this is a bad idea?